You're walking through a quiet forest, sunlight filtering through the leaves, when your foot catches on something uneven beneath the moss. Brushing aside the greenery, you uncover stones worn smooth by time, an ancient road hidden for centuries. Who built this path? Where did it lead? And why was it left to vanish into the earth? These abandoned road networks are far more than forgotten trails. They're silent storytellers, whispering secrets of empires that once shaped the world. From the vast highways of Rome to the winding trade routes of the Silk Road, these crumbling pathways are like invisible ink on a map, revealing borders, trade lines, and even the ambitions of civilizations long gone. Think about the last road trip you took, the highways connecting cities, the bridges spanning rivers. Now imagine those roads abandoned, swallowed by forests or buried under sand. That's the fate of countless ancient routes, built by empires that ruled continents, only to fade into obscurity. But here's the fascinating part: these roads didn't just disappear. They left clues hidden in the landscape, etched into the earth, waiting for us to decipher them. Archaeologists and historians are like detectives, piecing together fragments of stone, soil, and old maps to reconstruct the rise and fall of lost worlds. And what they've uncovered is astonishing. Roads that once carried armies, merchants, and ideas across vast distances, binding empires together before vanishing into legend. This journey isn't just about stones and dirt, it's about the people who walked these paths centuries ago. What drove them to carve roads through mountains or cross scorching deserts? How did these networks hold empires together, and why did they crumble? The answers lie beneath our feet, in the faint traces of routes that once connected distant corners of the globe. So let's step off the beaten path and into the past, where every overgrown trail has a story to tell. Together, we'll uncover how these abandoned roads reveal a secret map of lost empires, and how they still shape the world we live in today. To understand why ancient empires poured so much effort into building roads, picture this: a messenger sprinting down a stone-paved path, carrying urgent orders from the emperor. A merchant's wagon rumbles past, loaded with spices and silk. Soldiers march in formation, their boots wearing grooves into the stone. These roads were the arteries of civilization, pulsing with the lifeblood of trade, communication, and control. Take Rome's legendary highways, stretching over 50,000 miles at their peak. Built with layers of crushed stone, mortar, and paving slabs, they were engineered to withstand centuries. The famous Appian Way, begun in 312 BC, wasn't just a road, it was a statement. Rome didn't just conquer territory, it stitched it together with unshakable permanence. But Rome wasn't alone. High in the Andes, the Inca Empire crafted a mountain-spanning web of roads without wheels or iron tools, their secret precision. They fitted stones so tightly that a knife blade couldn't slip between them. Suspension bridges woven from grass ropes crossed dizzying gorges, while stepped pathways clung to cliffsides. These weren't just trails, they were feats of communal labor, binding distant provinces to the heart of the empire. A relay of runners could carry a message from Quito to Cusco, over 1,500 miles in just a week. That's faster than the postal service of colonial America centuries later. What made these roads endure while empires crumbled around them? The answer lies in their purpose. They weren't just built to last, they were built to adapt. Roman roads drained rainwater through clever cambered designs, preventing erosion. Inca pathways followed natural ridges, avoiding floodplains. And both networks served multiple masters, armies one day, pilgrims the next, then merchants, shepherds, even spies. When Rome fell, its roads didn't vanish. they became the skeleton of medieval Europe. Pilgrims followed them to Jerusalem. Traders reused them for new markets. The very resilience that served empires made these roads outlive them, quietly waiting for us to rediscover their stories. Now look closer at those moss-covered stones in the forest. The grooves worn by countless footsteps tell us something profound. Roads remember. They hold the echoes of conversations in forgotten languages, the weight of cargo that shaped economies, the march of armies that redrew maps. Every overgrown path is a ledger of human ambition, etched into the earth itself. The stones beneath our feet often outlast the hands that laid them. While grand palaces and temples crumble, roads persist silent witnesses to the passage of time. Their survival isn't just luck, it's a testament to ingenious engineering and the relentless practicality of human movement. Take the ancient Via Egnatia stretching across the Balkans. Built by the Romans in the 2nd century BC, it carried legions, then Byzantine traders, later Ottoman armies, and even 20th century refugees. Each era left its mark, but the road itself remained, adapting to new masters like a river changing course without losing its name. Dating these pathways is like reading a book where every chapter is written by a different author. Archaeologists look for the subtle clues, the wear patterns on stones, the layers of gravel packed down by centuries of footsteps, even the pollen trapped in ancient mud to reveal what plants grew alongside the road when it was in use. In Britain, the hollow ways, sunken lanes worn deep by medieval carts follow routes so old they may have begun as Bronze Age trails. The depth of erosion tells a story of relentless use, while pottery shards or coins tossed by travelers help pinpoint the timeline. Sometimes the land itself holds memories. LiDAR technology, lasers scanning the ground from above, can reveal ghostly outlines of roads hidden under forests or farmland. In Cambodia, these aerial surveys exposed a sprawling network of Inca-era highways, complete with canals and rest houses, all swallowed by jungle, the most surprising part. Many of these routes still guide modern villagers, their paths echoing decisions made 800 years ago. It's as if the earth refuses to forget, even when we do. Then there are the roads that vanish and reappear like whispers. The Silk Road wasn't a single path but a shifting web of routes, changing with politics, climate, and bandit activity. A caravanserai abandoned in one century might thrive again the next when trade revived. Historians trace these fluctuations through merchant ledgers, traveler diaries, and the spread of goods: Chinese porcelain in Persia, Venetian glass in Mongolia. Each fragment is a breadcrumb leading back to the invisible highways that connected continents. What's extraordinary isn't just that these roads survived, but how they shape us today. Modern highways in Italy often follow Roman alignments because, frankly, the Romans knew what they were doing. Their roads avoided swamps, hugged stable ground, and took the most efficient gradients. In Peru, rural communities still use Inca stairways to traverse mountains because no modern engineer has improved on their design. These aren't relics, they're living infrastructure, proving that the best solutions transcend time. So the next time you're stuck in traffic, remember you might be riding the same route as a Roman chariot, a Silk Road merchant, or an Inca messenger. The pavement changes, but the path endures. Uncovering these ancient roads isn't just about luck or stumbling upon moss-covered stones. It's a high-tech treasure hunt. Imagine flying over a dense jungle canopy, lasers piercing through the leaves to map the ground below with pinpoint accuracy. That's the power of LiDAR, or light detection and ranging technology. It's like giving archaeologists X-ray vision, revealing ghostly outlines of roads buried for centuries under vegetation or sand. In Belize, LiDAR scans exposed the vast network of Maya white roads, paved with crushed limestone and radiating like spokes from lost cities. These weren't just dirt paths, they were elevated highways some 30 feet wide, designed to stay dry during heavy rains. Until LiDAR, many of these routes were invisible, hidden beneath a green veil. But lasers aren't the only tool rewriting history. Ground-penetrating radar sends pulses into the earth, painting a picture of what lies beneath without lifting a shovel. In Turkey, this technology helped trace the footsteps of Roman soldiers along the Via Sebast, uncovering milestones and drainage systems buried under farmland. Meanwhile, satellites orbiting miles above Earth catch subtle clues, straight lines in crop fields, faint discolorations in soil that hint at roads long since plowed under. When researchers combined these images with old maps and local legends in Saudi Arabia, they pieced together sections of the incense road, once trod by caravans carrying frankincense to the Mediterranean. Yet for all the gadgets, old-fashioned digging still plays a starring role. Excavating a single stretch of road can reveal layers of history like tree rings. In England, archaeologists scraping away soil near Hadrian's Wall found not just Roman paving stones, but older Celtic tracks beneath them, showing how conquerors often repurposed the roads of the people they subdued. And sometimes the smallest finds tell the biggest stories. A single coin dropped by a traveler, a broken wagon wheel, or even the ruts worn into bedrock by generations of carts. These fragments let us reconstruct entire journeys. The real magic happens when all these techniques converge. Take the hunt for lost cities in Cambodia's Inca region. LiDAR revealed a sprawling grid of roads and canals, but it was on-the-ground surveys that uncovered roadside temples and rest houses. By matching airborne data with pottery shards and inscriptions, researchers realized this wasn't just a transportation network, it was a carefully planned empire, with roads acting as both lifelines and symbols of power. Every rediscovered route is a thread pulling us deeper into the past, leading to places we didn't even know to look for. And that's the thrilling part, these roads aren't just relics. They're invitations. A sunken path in the Andes might guide archaeologists to an unknown Inca outpost. A Roman mile marker in the desert could pinpoint a vanished trading post. With every road we map, the lost cities at their endpoints come into sharper focus, waiting to share their secrets. Roads don't just connect places, they lead us to lost worlds. Picture an archaeologist hacking through dense jungle, tracing a crumbling stone causeway that suddenly opens into a plaza lined with towering pyramids. That's exactly how explorers rediscovered Tikal, one of the greatest Maya cities, hidden for centuries beneath Guatemala's canopy. The roads were the clue. Those raised limestone highways gleaming white in the sun didn't just link cities, they pointed straight to them like arrows on a treasure map, and Tikal was no outlier. Across the ancient world, roads served as deliberate invitations, guiding us to the heart of forgotten civilizations. Take Persia's Royal Road, stretching over 1,600 miles from modern-day Turkey to Iran. Built by King Darius I in the 5th century BC, it wasn't just a trade route, it was a meticulously planned web of power. Every 20 miles, a rest stop for royal couriers. Every few hundred miles, a bustling hub like Sardis or Susa, where goods, ideas, and even religion spilled into the empire. When archaeologists pieced together fragments of this road, they didn't just find cobblestones, they uncovered entire cities buried in plain sight, their locations preserved in the curve of the road like a fingerprint. But sometimes what's missing speaks louder than what remains. In the American Southwest, the ancestral Pueblones left behind a network of roads so straight they'd put a Roman engineer to shame. Yet these paths often stop abruptly at canyon edges, no bridges, no stairs. Why? The answer lies in the cliffs themselves. Hidden handholds and footholds suggest these were spiritual journeys, roads designed not for wagons but for pilgrims climbing toward sacred high places. The gaps aren't oversights, they're silent testimonies to a culture that saw movement as sacred. Then there's the eerie precision of the Minoan roads on Crete, paved with gypsum slabs that still gleam under the Mediterranean sun after 4,000 years. Unlike later Greek roads that meandered between villages, these ran ruler straight to palatial centers like Knossos, hinting at a highly centralized power. When those palaces burned, the roads outlived them, becoming the skeleton of a lost bureaucratic world. What's astonishing is how these pathways transcend their original purpose. A road built for armies might later carry spices, then pilgrims, then archaeologists, each era leaving its own layer of meaning. The stones remember more than we realize. A rut worn by chariot wheels in Turkey might mirror grooves left by ox carts in medieval France, proof that human needs change far slower than empires. And when we follow these roads today, we're not just tracing routes, we're walking in the footsteps of merchants, soldiers, and wanderers who shaped history 1 mile at a time. Now imagine standing at a crossroads where two ancient highways meet. One leads to a vanished city, the other to a mountain pass abandoned when trade dried up. That intersection isn't just geography, it's a frozen moment in time, a decision point that once determined the flow of silver, silk, or ideas across continents. Every overgrown path holds these choices, waiting for us to uncover them. The Silk Road wasn't just a highway for silk and spices, it was a river of ideas flowing across continents. Picture a caravan stopping for the night in a bustling oasis town. Merchants haggling in a dozen languages, scholars debating under the stars, monks sharing scriptures by firelight. This was the real magic of ancient trade routes. They didn't just move goods, they moved minds. When Buddhist monks trekked from India to China along these paths, they carried more than prayer beads. They carried an entire philosophy, planting monasteries like way stations for the soul. And it wasn't just religion. The secret of papermaking slipped out of China in the 7th century, hidden in the saddlebags of traders, transforming literacy from Mesopotamia to Andalusia. But roads giveth, and roads taketh away. Those same bustling pathways that spread knowledge also carried devastation. The Black Death didn't need a map, it followed the ruts of wagon wheels and the footsteps of merchants, racing from Asia to Europe along trade routes in the 14th century. The speed was horrifying. By the time one village realized the danger, the next was already doomed. Roads made the medieval world smaller, for better or worse. A single cough in a Genos trading post could echo across continents, rewriting history in its wake. Yet the most astonishing thing about these networks isn't what traveled on them. It's how they reshaped the world long after the traffic stopped. Take the Swahili coast of Africa, where Arabic, Bantu, and Persian languages blended into a new culture, all because of monsoon winds trade routes linking Zanzibar to India. Or consider how Roman roads became the backbone of Christian pilgrimage routes centuries later, their stones worn smooth by sandals instead of sandals. These paths outlived their builders because they weren't just stone and dirt, they were living conversations between civilizations. Now, shift your gaze from the peaceful exchange of ideas to something darker, conquest. Those same roads that carried silk and scripture also marched with armies, their stones trembling under the weight of empire. When the Mongols galloped across the Silk Road in the 13th century, they weren't just raiders, they were road engineers, maintaining and expanding the very highways that fueled their conquests. Speed was their weapon, and the ancient trade routes became their battlefield supply lines. A messenger could ride from Budapest to Beijing in weeks, thanks to a network of way stations spaced a day's travel apart. No empire before or since moved so fast, so far. The lesson is clear. Whoever controls the roads controls the story. Rome's legions built highways to move troops, then watched as those same roads brought in foreign gods and rebel ideas. The Incas' mountain paths unified an empire until Spanish conquistadors used them to dismantle it. Roads on neutral ground, serving merchants and marauders with equal efficiency. That's why archaeologists study them like battle plans. A single abandoned military road in the Sahara can reveal where a kingdom drew its borders, where it felt safe, where it feared attack. The stones remember the tread of sandals, the clink of armor, the silent retreat of the defeated. So the next time you see an old map crisscrossed with faded lines, remember, those aren't just roads. They're the pulse of history itself, beating with the footsteps of monks and merchants, soldiers and spies. And sometimes, if you listen closely, you can still hear the echoes of what they carried. Military highways weren't just roads. They were the iron sinews of empires, flexing with the weight of armies and the urgency of command. Imagine a Roman legion on the move, their hobnailed sandals pounding the stone paved via a pier. Each soldier carried 80 pounds of gear, yet they could cover 25 miles a day, a pace modern armies still admire. That speed wasn't accidental. Rome's engineers built roads with military precision, straight as arrows, draining rainwater to prevent mud, wide enough for columns to march 6 abreast. When rebellion flared in Gaul or Judea, those highways became Rome's lifeline, rushing legions to hotspots before discontent could spread. But Rome wasn't alone in this tactical mastery. Persia's royal road, stretching from the Aegean to the heart of Iran, had a secret weapon: fresh horses. Royal couriers could relay messages 1,500 miles in just 7 days by swapping mounts at way stations spaced a day's ride apart. Herodotus marveled that neither snow nor rain nor dark of night slowed these riders, an echo of postal service mottos centuries later. And then there was the Yam system of the Mongols, a network of relay posts where Genghis Khan's messengers could gallop 200 miles in a single day, their orders crisscrossing Eurasia faster than rumors. These weren't just roads, they were early versions of the internet information superhighways that let empires react faster than their enemies could conspire. Yet for all their brilliance, these systems carried the seeds of their own vulnerability. When maintenance faltered, so did control. The Roman Empire's slow unraveling can be traced in the crumbling mile markers of its roads. As tax revenues dwindled, local governors patched highways with rubble instead of stone. Bridges collapsed, slowing troop movements. By the time Attila's Huns arrived, legions that once marched at lightning speed were bogged down, unable to reinforce distant provinces. The same roads that built the empire now hastened its fragmentation, as isolated regions learned to survive without Rome's protection. The Mongols faced a different reckoning. Their Yam stations, once stocked with spare horses and fodder at imperial expense, became targets for bandits when central authority weakened. Without fresh mounts, messages slowed to a crawl. A rebellion in Persia might burn for weeks before the Khan in Karakoram even heard of it. Speed had been their greatest weapon until it wasn't. Perhaps the most haunting lesson lies in the Inca roads. When Spanish conquistadors arrived, they marveled at the stone staircases clinging to Andean cliffs, the suspension bridges swaying over gorges. But these marvels required something the invaders didn't understand: communal labor. Every household in the empire owed days of work to maintain roads, a system shattered by European diseases and forced labor in mines. Without that upkeep, landslides buried pathways, ropes rotted, and the empire's nervous system failed. The Spanish, oblivious, kept using the roads until they too crumbled, leaving behind ghostly traces of what had once connected 10 million people. The irony is bittersweet. Roads built to last centuries often outlived the empires that made them, but only as shadows of their former selves. A Roman highway might become a medieval pilgrim's path, then a farmer's boundary wall, its original purpose forgotten. Yet even in decay, these routes whisper warnings. Infrastructure isn't just about stone and mortar. It's about the collective will to sustain it. When that will falters, the fastest highway becomes a dead end. The moment an empire falters, its roads begin to vanish, not with a bang, but with a slow, relentless fade. Take Rome's legendary highways. Once the pride of an empire, they became quarries for medieval villagers, their stones pried up to build barns and churches. The same slabs that carried legions to the edges of the known world now formed the walls of peasant cottages, their imperial purpose forgotten. In Britain, entire sections of Roman road were swallowed by peat bogs, the weight of centuries pressing them deeper into the mud until only faint ridges in the grass hinted at their existence. It's a quiet irony. The very permanence that made these roads symbols of power also made them targets. Across the Atlantic, the Inca faced a crueler fate. When Spanish conquistadors shattered their empire, the meticulous maintenance of their mountain highways collapsed. Grass ropes holding suspension bridges rotted away, leaving yawning gaps over rivers. Landslides buried staircases carved into cliffsides. Without teams of laborers to clear debris, a system the Spanish dismantled, these pathways became treacherous, then impassable. Yet nature didn't just destroy them, it camouflaged them. Moss softened the edges of stone steps. Tree roots cradled abandoned way stations like skeletal hands. What took centuries to build slipped back into the earth in decades, hidden in plain sight. But here's the twist: roads refuse to die completely. In North Africa, Roman milestones still stand in the desert, their Latin inscriptions sandblasted but legible, marking distances to cities that no longer exist. In Peru, farmers tending terraces unknowingly follow the exact alignments of Inca roads, their plows bouncing over stones laid 500 years ago. Even deliberate destruction couldn't erase them entirely. During the Middle Ages, rival kings often ordered roads torn up to slow invaders, yet the underlying routes persisted, traced by the stubbornness of foot traffic. People kept walking the same paths even when the paving was gone because the land itself remembered the way. The most haunting reclamations happen in forests. Europe's medieval hollow ways are now sunken tunnels beneath canopies, their walls thick with roots. Rain carves deeper into the ruts left by ox carts, creating gorges where children play, unaware they're standing in the footprints of charcoal burners and pilgrims. In Cambodia, strangler figs twist around Angkor's causeways, their roots fusing with the stone until tree and road become one. Nature doesn't just cover these paths, it absorbs them, turning arteries of empire into veins of wilderness. Yet sometimes the land gives clues. In Turkey, drought-stricken fields reveal ghostly parallel lines, the buried foundations of Roman roads when viewed from above. In the American Southwest, moonlight catches on bits of mica embedded in ancestral Puebloan trails, creating shimmering ribbons across the desert. These whispers of the past remind us that roads aren't just constructions, they're conversations between humans and Earth. When empires fall, the dialogue doesn't end, it just changes language, written in roots and rain instead of stone. Forests have a way of swallowing history whole. One season, a Roman road gleams under the Mediterranean sun. A few centuries later, it's buried under layers of leaf litter, its stones pried apart by roots as thick as a man's arm. But nature's reclamation isn't just destruction, it's transformation. In Turkey, the once mighty Lycian Way, carved into cliffsides by an ancient seafaring culture, now hides beneath a carpet of wild thyme and juniper. Walk those slopes today, and you might miss it entirely until your boot scrapes against something unnaturally smooth. That's the magic of these vanishing acts. The land doesn't erase roads. It disguises them. Deserts play a different game. Sand doesn't bury roads so much as absorb them, grain by grain. The incense route of Arabia, trodden by camel caravans for millennia, vanishes for decades until a rare storm washes away the dunes, exposing cobblestones polished by a million footsteps. Then, just as quickly, the wind covers them again, like a secret too precious to leave exposed. But the desert guards its clues carefully. In Jordan, Bedouin herders still follow trails marked by nothing more than slightly darker patches of gravel, paths their ancestors learned from watching ibex pick the firmest ground. Then there's water, nature's most relentless archaeologist. When the Maya city of Tikal fell, its raised limestone roads became canals, channeling rainwater into the jungle. In England, medieval hollow ways turned into seasonal streams, their ruts carved deeper by every storm. And along the Nile, entire highways vanished beneath the annual flood's fertile silt, only to resurface centuries later when farmers' plows struck the ghostly outlines of pharaonic paving stones. But here's what's extraordinary. Even as nature claims these roads, people remember. In the highlands of Scotland, farmers avoid ploughing certain fields because their grandparents spoke of the old straight track beneath the soil. In Rajasthan, pilgrims follow routes marked by nothing more than centuries-old peepal trees planted at regular intervals, living waypoints for journeys begun when Rome still ruled. And in Cambodia, where the jungle hid Inca's highways for generations, village elders spoke of stone snakes sleeping beneath the vines, stories dismissed as myth until LiDAR revealed their truth. These oral maps are more than folklore, they're survival strategies. When the Inca road system collapsed, Andean shepherds memorized the alignment of certain boulders to navigate mountain passes in blizzards. In the Sahara, Tuareg traders passed down descriptions of long-buried Roman wells, their locations precise enough to dig for water in emergencies. The roads themselves might fade, but the knowledge of where they ran and why lingers in songs, proverbs, and the stubborn human habit of taking the easiest path. So the next time you hike a trail that seems oddly straight or notice trees growing in a perfect row where no fence exists, pause. You might be standing on a palimpsest, a place where human ambition and natural forces have been rewriting each other for centuries. The stones may be gone, but the story isn't over. It's just waiting for someone to read between the roots. Folklore doesn't just tell stories, it preserves maps in plain sight. Across Europe, villages whisper of soldiers' roads where phantom legions march on moonlit nights, their boots echoing on stones no one can see. In Ireland, these tales aren't mere ghost stories, they're waypoints. When archaeologists listened to old farmers describing a ferry path that glowed at dawn, they uncovered the Sly Comsil, a medieval pilgrimage route to St. Columba's shrine, its cobbles hidden under peat for centuries. The locals had never stopped remembering, even when the road itself vanished. Half a world away, the Hopi people of the American Southwest speak of trails woven into their creation stories, paths their ancestors walked to reach sacred mesas. For generations, these oral maps seemed like myth until LiDAR revealed faint traces of those very routes, etched into the desert like invisible ink. One elder's description of a road that climbs the sky matched a precarious cliffside staircase, its handholds worn smooth by centuries of travelers. The stories weren't just allegories, they were navigation manuals passed down long after the stones were buried. Even the names we give landscapes are clues. In England, hollow lanes called Grimm's Ditches were once thought to be haunted, until excavations showed they were Saxon military roads, their steep banks designed to funnel enemies into kill zones. The word grim didn't mean scary. It echoed Woden's Grimnir, a name for the war god. The fear lingered in language long after the road's purpose faded. Now consider this: when modern engineers plot highways through the Alps, they sometimes consult 18th century shepherd songs. The lyrics describe mountain passes free of avalanches, the same routes Roman surveyors chose 2,000 years earlier. It's as if the land itself whispers the best path to anyone who listens. From Australian Aboriginal songlines that encode thousands of miles of terrain to Andean quipu knots recording distances between way stations, oral traditions are more than memory, they're survival technology. And that's the astonishing truth. These stories aren't just about the past, they're blueprints hiding in plain sight. When a new autobahn in Germany accidentally followed the exact curve of a medieval trade route, it wasn't coincidence, it was geography's quiet logic repeating itself. The same hills that made a safe path for ox carts still make the gentlest grade for trucks. The difference: today's engineers have topographic maps. Our ancestors had ballads, star charts, and the hard-won wisdom of blisters and broken axles. So the next time you hear an old tale about a witch's track or a giant's causeway, listen closely. That story might be the last thread connecting us to a road that moved empires. And sometimes all it takes is a curious mind and the right question to pull that thread until the past unravels into view. Now think about the highway you drove on today. Its curves, its exits, the places it avoids, chances are it's following ghosts. Modern asphalt often lays over ancient footpaths because human needs haven't changed as much as we think. The safest river crossing for a Neolithic trader is still the safest place for a bridge. The mountain pass that guided Bronze Age shepherds still offers the easiest climb. Roads remember even when we forget. And if you know how to listen, the land will always tell you where they've been. Drive down Germany's Autobahn today, and you're tracing the ghostly imprint of Roman chariots. That sleek modern highway follows the exact path of a 2,000-year-old military road, its curves dictated by the same hills and valleys that once guided legionnaires. This isn't coincidence, it's geography whispering across centuries. The most efficient route for a 21st century car is often the same one a Roman engineer chose for his ox carts, because rivers haven't moved and mountain passes haven't gotten any shorter. Now look at America's legendary Route 66, those winding stretches through the Southwest. They're paved over trails first worn by ancestral Puebloan traders carrying turquoise and obsidian. Later, Spanish explorers followed those same paths, then pioneer wagons, and finally asphalt trucks. The road changed surfaces, but the logic beneath it remained. Follow the water sources, skirt the steepest cliffs, connect the places people need to go. Even New York City's Broadway, that iconic slash through Manhattan's grid, started as a Lenape trail following a ridgeline, the driest high ground in a swampy island. Underground, the echoes grow louder. London's tube map is a modern labyrinth, but some lines mirror streets laid by Romans nearly 2 millennia ago. The central lines curve through the city. It shadows the Roman road to Londinium's Forum. When engineers dug tunnels for the underground in the 1860s, they often hit perfectly aligned Roman paving stones, proof that even when cities reinvent themselves, their oldest pathways refuse to disappear. What's fascinating isn't just the persistence of these routes, but how they shape modern life without us realizing. Take Paris. The city's notorious traffic circles follow the foundations of medieval gates, which themselves replaced Roman defensive walls. That annoying bottleneck you cursed during rush hour, blame Emperor Julian, who ordered the walls built in the 4th century. Urban planners didn't consciously preserve these patterns, they simply kept solving the same problems with the same solutions, generation after generation. But here's where it gets eerie. Modern technology confirms what folklore always hinted. Some roads are written into the land itself. Satellite analysis of Australia's outback shows Aboriginal songlines, ancestral routes memorized through song, aligning with the straightest paths between waterholes, even across hundreds of miles. Genetic studies reveal that Britain's prehistoric ridgeways, now hiking trails, still mark the routes of cattle drives from the Bronze Age. The Earth remembers. This continuity raises urgent questions. When a new highway project in Turkey uncovered a perfectly preserved Roman roadbed, engineers faced a dilemma: pave over history or reroute at great cost. Every time a backhoe bites into soil, it might erase millennia of footsteps. Yet we can't freeze progress. The challenge is balancing the practical needs of today with the fragile maps of yesterday, because once these roads vanish, the stories they carry vanish with them. The clash between progress and preservation isn't just a modern dilemma, it's a race against time, with ancient roads caught in the middle. Picture a construction crew in Istanbul, their excavators poised above a freshly uncovered stretch of Roman pavement. One wrong move and 2,000 years of history could vanish under concrete. This scene plays out daily in cities worldwide, where subway expansions, housing projects, and highway upgrades slice through layers of the past. The irony is brutal. The very infrastructure we build to connect our modern world often destroys the pathways that connected civilizations before us. But destruction isn't always accidental. In some places, ancient roadstones are looted by the ton, sold as decorative garden pavers or ground into gravel. The Via Egnatia, once the lifeline of Byzantium, now has gaping holes where cobbles were pried up by thieves. Archaeologists call it landscape stripping, the slow-motion erasure of history, one stone at a time. Yet the answer isn't simply locking these roads away. When Portugal walled off a medieval highway near Lisbon, locals rebelled. That path had been their shortcut to school for generations. Preservation can't mean freezing the past in amber. It has to live alongside the present. That's where projects like Rome's Via Appia Antiquar Park offer hope. Here, cyclists glide past Roman tombs, joggers weave through ancient milestones, and picnickers sprawl on grass that grows between 2,000-year-old paving stones. It's not a museum, it's a living artery where history breathes through everyday life. Similar efforts in Jordan's Petra preserve Nabatean roads while accommodating tourist buses, proving compromise is possible. The key lies in creative solutions: glass walkways over fragile stones in Turkey, or rerouting sewer pipes in Spain to avoid a Visigoth-era highway. The stakes couldn't be higher. These roads aren't just relics, they're time machines. In Mexico City, Aztec causeways still guide modern street layouts, their alignment proven to reduce flooding risks. When engineers in France ignored a Roman road's drainage design to build a shopping mall, the basement flooded within a year. The ancients knew things we're still relearning. Yet for every success, there's a silent loss. A Viking-age trackway in Denmark was paved over for a parking lot before archaeologists could study it. A section of the Silk Road in Uzbekistan disappeared under cotton fields during Soviet industrialization. The question isn't just how to save these roads, it's who gets to decide what survives. Local communities often hold the missing piece. In rural Peru, farmers blocked a mining company from dynamiting an Inca road by citing an oral tradition. Their ancestors swore the stones held the spirits of messengers who died running for the empire. The road was spared not by lawyers but by stories. This tension between memory and modernity isn't new. Medieval monks repurposed Roman roadstones for their cloisters, just as we now embed fragments of old highways into museum floors. Perhaps the cycle is inevitable. Roads fade, adapt, then rise again in new forms. but with technology like LiDAR revealing hidden networks faster than we can protect them, we're at a crossroads, literally. The choices we make today will determine whether future generations walk these ancient paths or only read about them in books. Now, imagine a different kind of explorer, not an archaeologist with a trowel, but a traveler with a backpack, tracing these forgotten routes not to study them, but to feel their pulse. From hobbyists hiking the entirety of Hadrian's Wall to journalists retracing the slave trade routes of Zanzibar, modern adventurers are breathing new life into old roads. Their journeys reveal something startling. These paths still have stories to tell, and they're not done with us yet. There's something irresistible about walking where empires once marched. Today, modern adventurers strap on boots, mount bicycles, or saddle camels to retrace these ancient routes, not as conquerors but as pilgrims of history. Along Peru's Inca Trail, hikers gasp for breath at 13,000 feet, their footsteps echoing those of royal messengers who once sprinted these same stone staircases. In Central Asia, cyclists bump along the skeletal remains of the Silk Road, dodging potholes that might have swallowed Genghis Khan's cavalry. These travelers aren't just sightseeing, they're resurrecting conversations between civilizations that fell silent centuries ago. Take the Darien Gap, that infamous 60-mile stretch of jungle between Panama and Colombia. While modern maps show it as a blank space interrupting the Pan-American highway, Spanish chronicles tell of a paved road here, built by indigenous peoples long before Columbus, then abandoned to the vines. Expeditions still vanish trying to cross it, just as they did in the 16th century. That enduring mystery is the allure. Some roads refuse to be tamed, guarding their secrets like dragons hoarding gold. But for every impassable gap, there's a rediscovery waiting to happen. When a British historian recently walked the entire length of the Via Egnatia, the Roman road linking the Adriatic to Istanbul, she found villagers in Albania still using sections as their main street. In Mongolia, nomadic families offer tea to cyclists tracing the Yam routes, unknowingly reenacting the hospitality that once fueled Genghis Khan's messengers. These encounters stitch the past to the present, proving these roads aren't dead, just dormant. What's truly remarkable is how these journeys keep uncovering new chapters. A German hiker following the Amber Road through Poland stumbled upon a medieval milestone half buried in a potato field. Its inscription led archaeologists to a lost trading post. In Jordan, a YouTuber filming his trek along the King's Highway noticed peculiar stone alignments. They turned out to be Nabatean water channels hidden in plain sight. The democratization of exploration means every traveler with a sharp eye can rewrite history. Yet the legacy of these roads extends far beyond adventure. The Inca Trail's precise gradients now inspire sustainable trail design in national parks. Silk Road rest stops, with their shaded courtyards and water systems, are models for desert eco-lodges. Even the failures hold lessons. The crumbling Roman roads of North Africa, undermined by poor drainage, warn modern engineers about cutting corners. These ancient pathways aren't just routes, they're textbooks in stone, teaching us how to build for the ages. Now, shift your gaze from windswept trails to bustling city streets, because the same roads that carried armies and caravans also shaped the urban landscapes we know today. The logic of ancient city planning reveals a startling truth. Your morning commute probably follows a path laid out centuries before your country existed. Walk the streets of Pompeii today, and you'll notice something startlingly modern beneath your feet: sidewalks. Not just any sidewalks, but elevated ones with stepping stones to cross flooded roads, all aligned in a perfect grid. This wasn't haphazard urban sprawl, it was deliberate design. The Romans didn't just build roads, they engineered entire cities around them, with main thoroughfares like the Via dell'Abbondanza serving as the backbone for commerce, social life, and even sanitation. Gutters channeled rainwater away from homes, while the strategic placement of bakeries, taverns, and public fountains turned these roads into lifelines. And when Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD, it froze this system in time, giving us a snapshot of how roads didn't just connect places, they organized civilizations. But Pompeii wasn't unique. Over in the Indus Valley, the streets of Mohenjo-Daro were laid out in a grid 4,000 years ago, with main avenues wide enough for ox carts and side alleys leading to communal wells. What's astonishing isn't just the precision, it's the foresight. These roads doubled as drainage channels with covered sewers running beneath them, a feat of engineering unmatched until the 19th century. The city's planners even standardized brick sizes to ensure every road and building fit the master plan. This wasn't just urban design, it was a statement of unity, a way to bind thousands of people together under shared infrastructure. Fast forward to modern Boston or London, and you'll see the same principles at work. Roman road engineers prioritized straight lines not for aesthetics but for efficiency. The shortest distance between 2 points still governs GPS routes today. Medieval Paris grew outward from the Roman-era Rue Saint-Jacques, just as Atlanta's Peachtree Street follows a Cherokee trading path. The difference? We've traded stone for asphalt, but the logic remains. Roads dictate where people gather, trade, and live. Now consider the unintended consequences. When Rome's Appian Way was built, it bypassed small villages in favor of strategic military hubs. Those villages withered, while towns along the route blossomed into cities. Urbanization isn't a modern phenomenon, it's been shaped by roads for millennia. Even Mohenjo-Daro's decline might trace to shifts in river trade routes, proving that when roads fall silent, so do the cities they feed. Yet the most enduring legacy of these ancient networks isn't in their stones, it's in their ability to move ideas. Pilgrims walking the Camino de Santiago today follow medieval paths that overlay Roman roads, which themselves might trace prehistoric migration routes. Every footstep carries echoes of the past, a reminder that roads are more than pavement, they're the stage where history unfolds. Pilgrims setting out on Spain's Camino de Santiago didn't just walk a path, they traced a living tapestry of faith, stitched together over 1,000 years. Every worn step on those ancient stones carried more than tired travelers. It bore languages, art, and ideas swirling together like colors in a stained glass window. Along Japan's Kumano-Kodo, Shinto shrines and Buddhist temples stood side by side, their quiet courtyards hosting debates between monks who'd trekked from distant provinces. These roads weren't merely routes to holy sites, they were slow-moving rivers of thought, where a chance encounter under a wayside oak might spark a theological revolution. Consider the humble rest stop. In medieval Europe, monasteries dotting pilgrimage routes doubled as libraries and scriptoriums. A Benedictine monk in Cluny might copy an Arabic medical text brought by a Moorish traveler, while a Norse merchant traded tales of northern gods to scribes who'd weave them into local folklore. The road didn't discriminate, it carried heresies and orthodoxies with equal ease. Even the act of walking became a kind of dialogue, as pilgrims from Germany, Italy, and France compared dialects, inadvertently blending them into the lingua franca of the trail. Now cross continents to the Kii Peninsula, where Japan's Kumano-Kodo snakes through cedar forests. Here, aristocrats and peasants alike followed routes marked with stone Buddhas, their surfaces polished smooth by generations of fingertips. The real miracle wasn't just reaching the shrines, it was the transformation along the way. Travel diaries from the Heian period reveal how courtiers who began their journey composing formal waka poetry returned speaking the earthy slang of porters and innkeepers. Roads have a way of sanding down social hierarchies, leaving behind something new. But the most profound exchange wasn't between people, it was between writing systems. Along the Silk Road, Uyghur scribes adapted Syriac script to write Mongolian, while Tibetan monks carved Sanskrit prayers into stone tablets using Phoenician-derived letters. In West Africa, Arabic calligraphy borrowed from Berber traders evolved into the elegant Ajami script used to write Fulani and Hausa languages. These innovations didn't happen in royal courts or universities. They sprang up at roadside caravanserais where tired scribes shared ink and shortcuts under the stars. The lesson is clear: when scripts collide on open roads, they don't clash, they conjugate. Armenian monks fleeing persecution carried their alphabet to Bulgaria, where it influenced Cyrillic. Viking runes left at Byzantine way stations trickled into Slavic glyphs. Even the humble hyphen owes its existence to medieval pilgrims' shorthand, scribbled in margins to save precious parchment. Every curve of a letter, every dot of an accent tells the story of a chance meeting, a shared meal, a night's shelter offered beside the embers of a dying fire. Now imagine a traveler pausing at a crossroads, tracing unfamiliar characters carved into a milestone. In that moment, the road does more than connect places. It becomes a classroom without walls, where every passerby is both teacher and student. The stones remember these exchanges, even when the parchment crumbles and the ink fades. What we call language is really just the echo of countless footsteps, each adding a syllable to an endless conversation. Trade routes did more than move spices and silk, they carried the building blocks of knowledge itself. Picture a Phoenician merchant in the 12th century BC, scratching symbols into a clay tablet to record a shipment of Tyrian purple dye. Those marks, simple, efficient, designed for speed, would become the seeds of alphabets from Athens to Rome. As his ship docked in Greek ports, local scribes adapted his symbols, adding vowels to create a script that would later birth Latin letters. The very words you're hearing now trace back to those dockside exchanges where practicality trumped tradition. Roads and sea lanes became linguistic petri dishes where scripts mutated to fit new tongues. Now shift eastward, where Sanskrit, the refined language of Hindu scriptures, hitched rides on bullock carts rumbling along the Grand Trunk Road. By the 3rd century BC, this 2,000-mile artery from Bengal to Afghanistan had turned into a conveyor belt for ideas. Buddhist monks translated sutras at roadside monasteries, their ink mixing Sanskrit roots with local Prakrit dialects. The result: languages like Bengali and Marathi still bear the grammatical fingerprints of those ancient collaborations. Even the word sugar traveled this way, starting as Sanskrit sarkara, becoming Persian shakar, then Arabic sakar, before sweetening European tongues as sukkar and zucker. Africa's caravan routes tell a parallel story. When Arab traders reached the Swahili coast, their script collided with Bantu languages. What emerged was a linguistic alloy, Arabic letters wrapping around African rhythms, creating Kiswahili. Today, that hybrid tongue unites over 100 million people across East Africa. Its very existence proof that roads don't just transport goods, they forge identities. You can hear the history in place names too. Zanzibar's stone town isn't called that in Swahili, it's Mjini, from the Arabic Madina, meaning city. The roads remembered what empires forgot, but words were just the beginning. Those same dusty trails became vectors for something even more revolutionary: scientific thought. When Mongol horsemen secured the Silk Road in the 13th century, they didn't just protect merchants, they created the world's first information superhighway. Persian astronomers in Samarkand received Chinese star charts, while Venetian glassmakers studied Syrian chemistry texts. The decimal system raced from India to Baghdad. then hopped Italian trading ships to Europe, where it replaced clumsy Roman numerals. Roads didn't just spread technology, they accelerated it, compressing centuries of innovation into decades. Consider the humble compass. Invented in Han Dynasty China for divination, it traveled westward via Silk Road caravans until Arab navigators realized its potential. By the time it reached Mediterranean ship captains, this novelty had transformed into a life-saving tool. The same happened with paper, a Chinese secret guarded for centuries until Arab prisoners at the Battle of Tollas in 751 AD smuggled the technique to Samarkand. Within generations, paper mills dotted trade routes from Damascus to Toledo, slashing the cost of books and democratizing knowledge. The most astonishing exchanges happened in neutral spaces, caravanserais where Christian, Muslim, and Jewish scholars broke bread under the same stars. In these roadside oases, Persian doctors shared surgical techniques with Byzantine physicians, while Andalusian agronomists scribbled notes on Persian irrigation methods. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad Part Library, Part Translation Hub became a terminal where Greek philosophy, Indian mathematics, and Persian medicine transferred onto the intellectual network. None of this could have happened without the safe passage guaranteed by well-trodden roads. Now look closer at those ancient trade maps. The spots where routes intersected Samarkand, Aleppo, Taxila weren't just bustling markets. They were the Silicon Valleys of their day, where chance encounters sparked breakthroughs. A Greek geometry text might gather dust in Alexandria for centuries until a Khwarezmian scholar stumbled upon it in a Kashgar bazaar, combining it with Indian algebra to birth new mathematics. Roads made such collisions inevitable, ensuring no innovation stayed isolated for long. The legacy lives on in unexpected ways. Next time you use the word algorithm, thank 9th century Persian mathematician Al-Khwarizmi, whose name was Latinized along medieval trade routes. When you check the time, remember that mechanical clocks spread from China to Europe via Mongol post stations. Even the concept of zero, that revolutionary placeholder, rolled along Indian trade roads until it became the bedrock of modern computing. What we call progress is really just the accumulation of countless roadside exchanges, each idea passing from hand to hand like a well-traveled coin. Perhaps the greatest testament to these linguistic highways isn't in libraries or laboratories, but in the names we barely notice. The orange you eat derives from Sanskrit, N-A macron R a letter 1 E4 5G A, filtered through Persian, narang, and Arabic, naranj before reaching European lips. The coffee you drink, its name cascaded from Ethiopian, kafa, to Yemeni, kawa, to Turkish, kave. Every sip, every bite carries the ghostly imprint of merchants, monks, and wanderers who turned dusty trails into conduits of culture. Roads didn't just connect places, they rewired human thought, one conversation at a time. Technology didn't just spread along ancient roads, it transformed as it traveled. Take something as simple as the wheel. What began as solid wooden discs in Mesopotamia evolved into spoked chariot wheels in the steppes, then into iron-rimmed cart wheels in Rome. Each upgrade hopping from culture to culture along trade routes like a game of telephone spanning centuries. The compass followed a similar path, starting as a Han Dynasty divination tool before Arab navigators reshaped it into a maritime lifesaver. By the time it reached Venetian ship captains, this curiosity had circumnavigated half the globe in both form and function. But the real magic happened when entire systems of knowledge hit the road. Chinese silk-making techniques were so fiercely guarded that leaking them was punishable by death, yet by the 6th century, Byzantine monks reportedly smuggled silkworm eggs in hollow walking sticks. The secret didn't just escape, it adapted. Persian weavers added intricate patterns, while Italian workshops pioneered new dyes, turning a monopoly into a mosaic of regional styles. Silk roads didn't just transport goods, they fractured secrets into 1,000 innovations. Mathematics traveled even faster. When the 9th century scholar Al-Khwarizmi compiled Indian numerals and Greek geometry in Baghdad, his work didn't gather dust in libraries. Jewish merchants carried it to Cordoba, where monks translated it into Latin. By the 12th century, Fibonacci was introducing these Arabic numerals to European markets, revolutionizing bookkeeping. The twist, Al-Khwarizmi's name itself became garbled along the way, morphing into the word algorithm, a fitting tribute to how roads transform ideas as much as transport them. Printing tells an even richer tale. Centuries before Gutenberg, Chinese artisans were stamping texts with wooden blocks. That technology crept westward, evolving into movable type in Korea before reaching Germany. But here's what's fascinating. Each adaptation solved local problems. Korean metal type addressed the complexity of Hanja characters, while Gutenberg's press catered to alphabetic scripts. The road didn't just spread invention, it forced reinvention at every stop. Yet for all these peaceful exchanges, roads had a darker purpose, one empires wielded like a weapon. Couriers racing along Persia's royal road carried more than trade ledgers. They bore troop movements and suppression orders. The Incas stationed chasqui runners every 6 miles, not just to relay weather reports, but to monitor rebellions. These networks weren't just arteries of commerce, they were the nervous systems of control, where information moved faster than dissent could spread. The Romans perfected this duality. Their cursus publicus courier system could rush a message from Britannia to Syria in weeks, but its way stations doubled as surveillance posts. Soldiers at these relay points didn't just change horses, they screened travelers for contraband or sedition. When Boudicca rebelled in Britain, it wasn't just legions that crushed her revolt. It was the roads that let Rome concentrate forces with terrifying speed. Now consider the Mongol Yam system's brutal efficiency. Their horse relays could outpace rumors, allowing Genghis Khan's generals to coordinate attacks across continents. A rebel leader in Russia might be dead before neighboring villages knew he'd risen up. This wasn't just communication, it was psychological domination, proving that whoever controlled the roads could rewrite reality itself. Espionage thrived in these shadows. Byzantine diplomats riding the Silk Road weren't just ambassadors, they were intelligence gatherers, smuggling back sketches of Chinese siege engines. Mughal spies in India posed as spice merchants, their caravans hiding coded messages in bales of pepper. Roads enabled empires to see without being seen, turning every merchant, pilgrim, or minstrel into a potential courier for secrets. The legacy of this duality still echoes today. Modern highways follow ancient spy routes. Internet cables trace paths first walked by couriers. The mediums change, but the game remains, because roads don't just connect places. They amplify power, accelerate ideas, and sometimes rewrite the rules of empire in the dust beneath our feet. Spies didn't just walk these ancient roads, they flew. Persia's royal messengers, known as the Angarium, were the fastest information network of their time. Mounted on swift horses and switching steeds at relay stations every 15 miles, they could cover the 1,600 miles from Susa to Sardis in just 7 days. A feat so impressive, Herodotus marveled that neither snow nor rain nor dead of night slowed their pace. But speed wasn't their only weapon. These riders carried more than scrolls, they bore secrets. Some messages were encrypted, hidden in wax tablets or woven into the seams of tunics. Others traveled as oral codes, memorized rhymes that only a trusted official could decipher. The roads were their lifelines, and the empire's survival depended on their souls. Rome took this system and militarized it. The cursus publicus wasn't just a postal service, it was a surveillance state on horseback. Government couriers carried hollow-tipped staffs containing dispatches sealed with imperial wax, while soldiers at way stations logged every traveler's origin and destination. When Julius Caesar needed to outmaneuver Pompey, it wasn't just his legions that gave him the edge. It was his ability to reroute messages through backcountry roads while his rivals' couriers stuck to predictable paths. Roads didn't just move messages, they were the chessboard where empires played their games of deception. But the most ingenious spies weren't even official agents. Silk Road merchants doubled as intelligence gatherers, their caravans stuffed with more than spices. A Babylonian textile trader might discreetly measure city walls with his walking staff, while a Sogdian wine seller memorized garrison sizes by counting the cups he served. In Byzantium, Emperor Justinian paid Armenian monks to map Persian fortifications during pilgrimages, their religious robes the perfect cover for sketching military layouts. The roads themselves became tools of espionage, their very existence revealing where empires felt secure and where they feared invasion. Yet for all their secrecy, these networks left traces. Archaeologists in Turkey recently uncovered a Roman way station near the Syrian border, its walls scratched with coded tallies, likely records of passing caravans or troop movements. In Central Asia, petroglyphs along forgotten stretches of the Silk Road show eerily precise depictions of oasis towns, suggesting they were used as visual guides for spies. Even the humble mile marker could be a weapon. Some Roman examples were deliberately mislabeled to confuse enemy scouts, turning geography itself into a lie. This shadow war had a surprising legacy, the birth of modern diplomacy. Venetian ambassadors traveling Ottoman roads developed the first systematic intelligence reports, cataloging everything from grain harvests to court gossip. Their relazini became blueprints for future diplomatic cables, proving that the art of statecraft was forged on horseback, one dusty mile at a time. Now shift your gaze from the covert to the colossal. Just as roads carried secrets, they also bore the weight of empires' most visible ambitions, their art and architecture. A single stretch of pavement could unite a kingdom's aesthetic, from the mosaics underfoot to the temples on the horizon. Walk the Via Sacra in Rome, and you'd pass marble statues from Greece, Egyptian obelisks shipped up the Tiber, and triumphal arches adorned with Persian-style reliefs. These weren't just decorations, they were propaganda in stone, proclaiming Rome's dominance over the known world. The Silk Road turned entire cities into canvases. In Samarkand, Timur the Lame imported artisans from conquered lands to tile his capital's mosques with a kaleidoscope of Chinese blue, Indian red, and Byzantine gold. The result, a visual manifesto of empire, where every glazed brick whispered that this crossroads ruled the world. Even the humblest caravanserai became an art gallery, its walls painted with murals of distant mountains or mythical beasts described by travelers. Roads didn't just transport art, they fused styles into something new, like a Persian miniature meeting a Tang dynasty landscape in the brushstrokes of a roadside muralist. But the greatest architectural marvels were the roads themselves. The Inca didn't just build paths, they sculpted the Andes, staircases cut from living rock, suspension bridges woven like tapestries, and retaining walls so precise they've withstood 500 years of earthquakes. These weren't mere engineering feats, they were declarations of harmony between empire and earth. A Roman viaduct might awe with its scale, but an Inca road humbled with its humility, following the mountain's will rather than forcing it. The proof lies in the details. Notice how Roman roads often align with celestial events. The Via Appia points directly to the rising sun on the summer solstice, turning the pavement into a sundial for the empire. Or how Inca's causeways are flanked by statues of gods and demons engaged in eternal tug of war, mirroring the Buddhist parable of balancing worldly and spiritual paths. Even the cracks tell stories. In Ephesus, ruts worn by centuries of cartwheels groove the marble streets like vinyl records, their depth revealing which shops were busiest. What's extraordinary isn't just the artistry, it's the democracy of it. A peasant walking the Appian Way saw the same triumphal arches as the emperor. A Mongol herder crossing the Tian Shan mountains trod the same patterned brick as Marco Polo. Roads were the first mass media, broadcasting imperial glory and cultural fusion to every traveler, whether they could read or not. So the next time you admire a fresco or cross a stone bridge, look closer. That art wasn't just made for the road, it was made by the road, shaped by countless footsteps, trades, and thefts of inspiration. The true masterpiece wasn't any single statue or temple, but the living network that connected them all. Buddhist statues standing in ancient Greece seem impossible until you walk the roads that made it happen. In the ruins of Alexandria, archaeologists unearthed serene stone Buddhas draped in Greek-style robes, their curls mimicking the hairstyles of Apollo. This wasn't coincidence, it was the work of merchants and monks who carried more than goods along the Silk Road. They transported entire artistic traditions, blending them at crossroads like a painter mixing colors on a palette. When Hellenistic sculptors in Gandhara, modern Pakistan, began carving Buddha's face with the balanced proportions of Greek gods, they birthed an entirely new aesthetic. Suddenly, Enlightenment looked like it had stepped off an Athenian frieze, with delicate drapery clinging to the meditative figure. The roads didn't just connect places, they merged imaginations. Caravanserais were the unsung studios of this creative revolution. Picture a moonlit courtyard on the Persian Royal Road, where a Byzantine mosaicist shares tesserae techniques with a Chinese ceramicist over steaming cups of chai. Nearby, a Sogdian weaver demonstrates how to spin gold thread for brocade, while an Egyptian glassblower trades secrets for cobalt pigments. These roadside inns weren't just pit stops. They were Renaissance workshops centuries before the Renaissance. The evidence survives in startling details. Persian floral motifs twining through Tang dynasty silks, Roman laurel wreaths crowning Indian temple sculptures, even Central Asian geometric patterns framing Coptic Christian frescoes. Every hybrid piece tells the same story. Art doesn't stay still when roads give it wheels. The fusion went deeper than decoration. In Afghanistan's Bamiyan Valley, where towering Buddhas once stood before their tragic destruction, the very rock was painted with Mediterranean pigments, ultramarine from lapis lazuli mined in Afghanistan and mixed with Greek binding techniques. Further east, Ajanta's cave murals in India reveal Persian perspective tricks learned from Sasanian artists fleeing war. Even calligraphy transformed as it traveled. Arabic script gained the flowing elegance of Chinese brushwork along Central Asian routes, while Tibetan monks adapted Indian alphabets into soaring vertical letters suited for mountain-carved inscriptions. Roads didn't just move art, they remade it at every fork. Now shift your gaze from temples to tomatoes. Those same caravans carrying statues and pigments also cradled seeds, tiny time capsules of agricultural revolution. When a merchant paused at a caravanserai to trade silk, he might also barter a pouch of strange seeds from his homeland. A Sogdian trader's seemingly ordinary baggage could contain the future of continents. Peach pits from China bound for Persia, eggplant seeds from India destined for Arabia, even saffron crocus bulbs tucked between rolls of parchment. The roads didn't just transport crops, they rewrote menus across civilizations. Consider the humble carrot, originally purple and bitter in its Afghan homeland. It turned orange and sweet after crossing paths with Byzantine selective breeding techniques. Rice traveled from Chinese paddies to Persian fields, where irrigation systems transformed it into a staple that would later feed caliphates. Even the durum wheat that shapes Italian pasta today traces its journey along Roman roads from Ethiopian highlands to Mediterranean mills. The most astonishing part, many of these crops moved faster than empires could conquer. While armies clashed at borders, seeds slipped through, sprouting into revolutions no sword could stop. Farmers became unwitting alchemists along these routes. In the Tarim Basin, Chinese mulberry trees met Syrian glassmaking techniques to create an unexpected marvel transparent silk, woven so finely it could be stretched over lampstands without smothering the flame. Spanish citrus groves owe their existence to Arab agronomists who carried grafting techniques along North African trade routes, while Viking longships accidentally spread Norwegian rye to Iceland via grain sacks repurposed as ballast. The roads didn't just feed bodies, they fueled experiments, turning fields into laboratories where the world's first global cuisine simmered in clay pots over caravan fires. The true measure of this exchange lies in what we now consider local, Thai chilies native to the Americas, arriving via Portuguese ships that followed maritime routes mirroring ancient land paths. Irish potatoes, Andean orphans that crossed the Atlantic thanks to Spanish silver roads. Even the coffee that fuels modern mornings began as an Ethiopian secret before Sufi monks carried it to Yemen, sparking a craze that would ripple outward like rings in a roadside puddle. Agriculture didn't just spread, it evolved, adapting to new soils and tastes with each mile traveled. The proof is on your plate, in every bite of food that once crossed continents on the backs of dusty-footed travelers. Crops didn't just feed empires, they built them. Picture a Roman soldier stationed on the rainy frontier of Britannia, biting into a loaf of bread made from wheat first domesticated in the Fertile Crescent. That simple meal was only possible because centuries earlier, Phoenician traders had carried the grain's ancestors along coastal routes, slowly adapting the crop to new soils. Roads didn't just move armies and merchants, they smuggled entire ecosystems into unfamiliar lands, one seed sack at a time. Take rice, for example. Originating in China's Yangtze Valley, it crept westward along the Silk Road's muddy river valleys, transforming Persian diets by the 5th century BC. But here's what's fascinating, it didn't travel alone. With each caravan came water management techniques, terraced fields from the Himalayas, irrigation tricks from Mesopotamia, creating a ripple effect that turned arid plains into lush paddies. By the time rice reached the Mediterranean, it wasn't just a crop, it was an agricultural revolution wrapped in a grain husk. The potato's journey was even more dramatic. Cultivated in the Andes for millennia, this humble tuber might have stayed confined to mountain slopes if not for Inca roads. Spanish conquistadors, stumbling upon vast storehouses of chuño, freeze-dried potatoes along these highways, recognized their potential. Within decades, Andean potatoes were sprouting in Basque gardens, then German fields, eventually becoming the caloric backbone of industrial Europe. Roads turned a localized staple into a global lifeline, proving that the most revolutionary technologies aren't always made of metal, sometimes they're edible. Yet these transformations weren't always peaceful. When sugarcane spread from New Guinea to India via ancient maritime routes, it fueled not just sweet teeth but entire slave trades. The same Persian royal road that carried saffron and pistachios also transported the knowledge of plantation systems, binding crops to conquest in ways that still echo today. A single stalk of wheat might seem innocent, but when it marched alongside armies, it could redraw societies as surely as any sword. What's often overlooked is how these crops remade the land itself. Roman roads lined with plane trees introduced Mediterranean shade to northern Europe, while Islamic traders along the incense route planted citrus groves as living way stations. The great Zimbabwe civilization's rise coincided with the arrival of Asian bananas via Swahili coast traders, their roots clinging to the hulls of dhows. These weren't just calories, they were landscape architects quietly reshaping continents to human tastes. Now, consider the unintended consequences. When millet traveled from China to Africa along Bantu migration routes, it didn't just fill bowls, it altered timekeeping. The crop's rapid growth cycle allowed for shorter fallow periods, accelerating village life into bustling towns. Similarly, the arrival of Central Asian apples in medieval France didn't just diversify orchards. Their predictable harvest seasons helped standardize market fares, laying the groundwork for modern economics. Roads didn't just diversify diets, they recalibrated civilizations around the rhythms of foreign harvests. The real magic happened at crossroads. In Samarkand's bazaars, Turkic nomads traded hardy Central Asian melons to Persian gardeners, who crossbred them with delicate local varieties. The result, fruits that could survive desert caravans yet still melt on the tongue. In Constantinople's imperial gardens, Byzantine agronomists mixed Chinese peach trees with Anatolian almonds, creating hybrid orchards that were living diplomacy. Every bite was a handshake between empires, a delicious reminder that roads didn't just transport food, they reinvented it. Perhaps no crop illustrates this better than the chili pepper. Native to the Americas, it circled the globe with dizzying speed after Columbus, but its real transformation happened on the road. In Hungary, it became paprika, fueling goulash and national identity. In Thailand, it met local peppercorns and sparked a culinary explosion. By the time it reached Sichuan, Chinese chefs were using it to reinvent ancient pepper-based dishes, creating entirely new flavor profiles. The chili didn't just spread, it evolved, adapting to every kitchen it touched. These edible migrations still shape us today. The spaghetti on your plate owes its existence to Arab traders who brought durum wheat to Sicily along North African routes. The chocolate in your dessert traces back to Maya merchants carrying cacao along Mesoamerican causeways. Even the coffee in your cup began its journey as a Yemeni monk's experimental crop planted along caravan stops. The roads may have crumbled, but their legacy lingers on our tongues, in our fields, and woven into the very fabric of how we feed the world. Now, shift your gaze from the crops to the hands that carried them. Behind every seed was a story, a farmer saving the best kernels for next year's planting, a mother tucking rice seedlings into her hem as she fled war, a sailor bartering millet for spices on a monsoon-washed dock. Roads didn't just move plants, they carried hopes, survival strategies, and sometimes the future itself, hidden in a traveler's pocket. Imperial roads were more than just stone and mortar. They were the physical manifestation of political power itself. When Qin Shi Huang first unified China in 221 BC, his famous decree of all under heaven wasn't just poetry, it was infrastructure policy. The empire's new standardized roads, with their uniform axle widths and way stations spaced exactly 30 li apart, weren't merely transport routes. They were the iron threads stitching together warring states into a single tapestry, where a bureaucrat from the dry northern plains could enforce the same tax code in the humid southern deltas. Every straight mile of the straight road from Xianyang to the Ordos Plateau whispered the same message: resistance is futile when the emperor's couriers can outpace rebellion. Rome took this concept and scaled it to dazzling extremes. The phrase, "all roads lead to Rome," wasn't just a metaphor, it was geographical fact. From the muddy outposts of Britannia to the olive groves of Syria, every milestone bore the same Latin numerals: Every provincial governor received the same edicts via the cursus publicus, and every tax collector used identical measuring rods to assess grain shipments. This wasn't just efficiency, it was psychological domination. A Gallic chieftain watching Roman surveyors carve straight lines across ancestral lands understood viscerally what empire meant. The land itself now answered to distant masters. Yet these networks carried their own vulnerabilities. When the Tang dynasty's meticulous post stations began crumbling in the 9th century, it wasn't just pavement decaying, it was central authority unraveling. Provincial warlords diverted funds meant for road repairs into private armies, while bandits turned neglected mountain passes into personal toll booths. Similarly, Rome's 3rd century crisis saw once proud highways disintegrate into local trails, their decay mirroring the empire's fragmentation. Without maintained roads, tax collectors couldn't reach rebellious provinces, nor could troops respond to border incursions. The stones didn't just connect cities, they were the pulse of imperial cohesion, and when their rhythm faltered, so did unity. Now consider the irony. These same roads that bound empires together also became escape routes when those empires crumbled. As Mongol hordes approached Baghdad in 1258, the Abbasid caliph's courtiers fled west along the very highways built to secure their rule, only to find bridges destroyed by the same provincial governors they'd taxed into resentment. During the fall of Constantinople, Byzantine refugees followed Roman roads their ancestors had built centuries earlier, carrying salvaged manuscripts that would later spark the Renaissance. The paths of conquest became trails of exodus, their stones bearing witness to both the rise of civilizations and their desperate flight. Migration transformed these roads in unexpected ways. When Visigoths streamed along the Via Augusta into Roman Hispania, they didn't just walk on the road, they repurposed its milestones as boundary markers for new kingdoms. Saxon settlers in Britain turned abandoned Roman highways into parish boundaries, their names Watling Street, Ermine Street, becoming linguistic fossils of imperial collapse. Even the Inca's Quhapacñan, once the spine of an empire, became a lifeline for Andean communities dispersing from Spanish rule, their collective memory of the road outlasting the state that built it. The most poignant journeys were those of the displaced. Armenian refugees fleeing Ottoman persecution in the 1890s followed Roman trade routes their ancestors had walked as merchants 2 millennia prior. Enslaved Africans forced along the Sahel's caravan trails turned those same paths into underground railways for their own liberation centuries later. Roads built to control became arteries of survival, their original purpose rewritten by each new generation of travelers. What emerges is a paradox. The very infrastructure designed to enforce unity could, in collapse, foster its opposite, the scattering of peoples, ideas, and identities. Yet, even in dispersal, these routes retained their connective power. A Roman road might now lead to a Frankish village instead of a legionary fort, but it still carried the imprint of the hands that first laid its stones. The empires faded, but the roads remembered, bearing witness to the endless cycle of consolidation and fragmentation that shapes human history. Beneath the shadow of empire, roads meant for chains became threads of liberation. The Underground Railroad's secret routes, mapped in quilt patterns, whispered in spirituals, and guided by stars, were just one chapter in a global story of defiance. In the mountains of Peru, enslaved Incas slipped away along the very highways built to bind their labor, hiding in way stations meant for imperial messengers. Across the Sahara, escaped captives followed ancient camel tracks to oasis towns like Timbuktu, where scholars sheltered them in labyrinthine libraries. Even Rome's meticulously patrolled highways hid fugitives. Archaeologists find small fireside caves near mile markers, where escaped gladiators and debtors once camped, their freedom bought by stolen miles. These paths weren't just physical, they were psychological lifelines. Enslaved people in the American South called secret trails the drunkard's path, zigzagging to confuse bloodhounds. In Australia's outback, Aboriginal guides led convict escapees along songline's ancestral routes, memorized through generations of oral maps. The contrast was stark. The same Roman roads that marched legions into Gaul also carried Christian refugees fleeing persecution, their sandals scuffing the stones where centurions once stood. Roads built to dominate became veins of resistance, proving that infrastructure has no allegiance, only utility. Now, shift your gaze from human flight to nature's upheaval. Climate change didn't just bury roads, it weaponized them. The Maya's limestone causeways, engineered to withstand torrential rains, became death traps during prolonged droughts. As reservoirs dried, desperate crowds clashed on these raised highways, their stones slick with blood instead of water. In the Andes, El Niño rains triggered landslides that erased entire sections of the Inca road system, isolating communities that depended on imperial supply chains. Even the mighty Silk Road faltered when shifting deserts swallowed oases, turning caravanserais into tombs of sand. The land itself rebelled. In Greenland, Norse settlers' peat block roads sank into thawing permafrost, their grooves filling with meltwater like grim prophecies. Along the Mekong, monsoon floods washed away Khmer Empire causeways, leaving only ghostly outlines visible from the air. These weren't just infrastructural failures, they were climate feedback loops. Collapsed roads meant no trade to relieve famine, no armies to quell unrest, no messengers to spread solutions. The very networks that sustained civilizations accelerated their collapse when nature shifted the rules. Yet some roads adapted. The Nabateans of Petra carved their trade routes with secret cisterns, channeling flash floods into reservoirs that kept routes open during droughts. In Inca, engineers built bridges with adjustable piers to accommodate wild monsoon swings, medieval climate resilience in stone. These ingenious fixes whisper a warning: the roads that survive aren't the strongest but the most responsive. As modern highways buckle under rising seas and wildfires, the past's failures and rare triumphs hold urgent lessons. The climate crisis isn't new, it's just forgotten. And the roads remember. Climate shifts didn't just alter landscapes, they erased entire networks of human connection. Picture the once bustling trade routes of the Akkadian Empire, where caravans laden with tin and textiles trudged across Mesopotamia. Then, around 4,200 years ago, the rain stopped. Soil cracked like shattered pottery, wells ran dry, and those vital pathways became dust-choked trails to nowhere. The collapse wasn't sudden, it was a slow suffocation, as merchants abandoned routes that no longer led to thriving cities, but to crumbling ruins and starving populations. This wasn't an isolated tragedy. Similar fates befell the Khmer Empire's causeways when monsoons grew erratic, and the ancestral Puebloans' footpaths when the American Southwest plunged into mega-drought. Roads that had pulsed with life for centuries became ghostly scars on the land, their purpose as forgotten as the prayers once whispered at roadside shrines. Water's absence wasn't the only threat. Its sudden return could be just as devastating. The Mayas' elevated limestone highways, engineered to withstand tropical downpours, met their match in prolonged floods that turned them into stagnant canals. At Capon, archaeologists found roads buried under layers of silt, their surfaces pocked by desperate attempts to dig drainage channels as waters kept rising. Along China's Yellow River, ancient highways were swallowed whole when floodplains shifted, leaving behind only cryptic mentions in imperial records of the vanishing roads. Even the mighty Romans couldn't out-engineer nature. Sections of the Via Appia near Brundisium sank beneath rising wetlands, their carefully laid stones now visible only through the clear waters of drought-starved lagoons. Today, climate change is writing a similar story in reverse. Rising seas lap at coastal sections of the Vikings' Ostvagar trading routes in Scandinavia, while thawing permafrost in Alaska warps ancient indigenous trails into unnatural zigzags. In Egypt's Nile Delta, salt water creeps into the soil around Roman-era roads, dissolving the gypsum mortar that held their stones together for millennia. The irony is stark. The very roads that once helped societies adapt now crumble under the weight of changes they were never designed to withstand. Archaeologists race against time, using LiDAR to map submerged highways off Doggerland, a lost Mesolithic land bridge, before ocean currents erase them completely. Yet amid these losses, roads reveal astonishing resilience. In Oman's deserts, frankincense trade routes abandoned for nearly 2 millennia still guide modern Bedouin herders during rare rains, their paths marked by faint alignments of stones visible only from the air. In the American Southwest, ancestral Puebloan trails reappear as ghostly lines of faster-growing grass after wet winters, their buried moisture retaining cobbles nurturing life centuries after their builders vanished. The land remembers even when we don't. This interplay between roads and the dead takes on literal meaning in societies where pathways bridge the worlds of the living and the ancestors. The Maya Sakbiab ceremonial white roads often connected temples to cenotes, portals to the underworld. Roman law required burial roads like the Via Appia to be built straight, ensuring spirits wouldn't get lost returning to visit their descendants. In Japan, the Michi-no-eki resting spots along ancient highways doubled as places to honor travelers who died en route, their spirits believed to linger where footsore pilgrims still pause. Perhaps most haunting are the roads that became graves. On Denmark's Haraldskær Woman's Trail, a 2,000-year-old bog body was found with leather shoes still intact, her final steps preserved in the very mud that claimed her. Along the Silk Road's Tarim Basin, mummies still wear their felt boots, frozen in eternal mid-journey by sudden sandstorms. These aren't just archaeological finds, they're frozen moments where the road's purpose shifts from connection to memorial, each stone and turn holding stories more enduring than the empires that laid them. As modern climate refugees retrace ancient migratory routes, Syrians following Roman roads into Europe, Central Americans moving north along ancestral trade corridors, we're reminded that roads outlive their builders. They become palimpsests of human adaptation, bearing witness not just to where we've been, but to the relentless, changing forces that shape where we're going next. Roads to the afterlife weren't just functional, they were celestial maps in stone. Egypt's Avenue of Sphinxes, stretching over a mile between the temples of Karnak and Luxor, wasn't merely a processional path. It was a reenactment of the sun god Ra's nightly journey through the underworld, each statue-lined step mirroring his passage between realms. When priests carried mummies along this road during the beautiful festival of the valley, they weren't just transporting bodies, they were guiding souls along a divine highway, its alignment precisely matching the midsummer sunrise. Beneath their feet, the very stones echoed the myth of Osiris, whose scattered body parts were said to be buried beneath similar roads across Egypt, turning the land itself into a sacred corpse. The Nazca lines take this concept skyward. Those enormous geoglyphs crisscrossing Peru's deserts aren't just art, they're ritual pathways for the dead, visible only from the heavens. Some lines converge at ceremonial mounds where parched bones have been found, suggesting processions that ended in exposure burials, letting the departed ascend on vulture wings. The straightness of these paths defies practical explanation until you realize many align with the Milky Way during the December solstice, mirroring Andean beliefs that souls followed this celestial river to the afterlife. Now step into the mythic realm where roads transform into bridges between worlds. The Bifrost of Norse legend wasn't just a rainbow, it was a shimmering road linking Midgard to Asgard, its red hue symbolizing fire that would crumble under the feet of unworthy travelers. Similarly, the Zoroastrians' Chinvat bridge grew narrow or wide based on a soul's deeds, while the Mayas' dark road through Xibalba twisted with trials only heroes could pass. These weren't metaphors but literal blueprints for the soul's journey, often reflected in earthly road design. The Roman Via Appia's infamous stretch lined with crucified rebels, and the Tibetan practice of sky burials along pilgrimage routes reveal a darker truth. Some roads were meant to display mortality itself. By placing death so visibly along traveled paths, cultures transformed every journey into a memento mori, a reminder that all roads ultimately lead to the same destination. Yet, even in decay, these pathways offered hope. The Buddhist stupas dotting the Silk Road weren't just shrines but symbolic ladders, their tiered designs guiding rebirth like stepping stones across a river of souls. What emerges is a paradox: roads built for endings became beginnings. The same stones that carried funeral biers also cradled pilgrims seeking enlightenment. There were patterns telling dual stories of departure and return. Perhaps that's why ancient engineers poured such care into these routes, not just to honor the dead, but to prove that no journey, not even death's, is truly solitary when the path remains. Myths don't just tell stories, they encode the deepest truths about how humans navigate the world. Take the yellow brick road from the Wizard of Oz. On the surface, it's a whimsical path to adventure, but dig deeper, and it mirrors real trade routes like the Silk Road, both promising transformation at journey's end. Or consider the Norse Bifrost, that shimmering rainbow bridge linking gods and mortals. It wasn't pure fantasy. It echoed the perilous ice roads of Scandinavia, where travelers crossed frozen rivers under aurora-lit skies, each step a gamble between survival and the abyss. These legends didn't spring from thin air. They were born from the real dangers and wonders of ancient highways, polished by time into metaphor. The blur between road and myth runs even deeper in tales like the Celtic Shea paths, hidden ferry roads that supposedly crisscrossed the Irish countryside. Farmers left these narrow strips of land untilled, fearing bad luck if they disturbed them. Modern LiDAR scans reveal something startling. Many align with prehistoric trading routes or ley lines connecting sacred sites. The ferry aversion, likely a folk memory of territorial disputes or tolls enforced by long-vanished kingdoms. Similarly, Japan's Kaiden ghost stories often unfold along remote mountain passes, the same routes where real-life travelers vanished during blizzards or bandit raids. The land remembers tragedy, even when people repackage it as folklore. These stories do more than entertain, they reveal how roads shape collective imagination. The Maya saw their white Sakbiob roads as mirrors of the Milky Way, earthly twins of celestial pathways. In India, the Ramayana describes a mythical bridge to Lanka, a tale now backed by geological evidence of a Neolithic land linked to Sri Lanka. Even the Bible's straight and narrow path finds echoes in Roman surveyors' precision, their roads cutting through obstacles as if divinely guided. Every culture, it seems, projects its aspirations onto the routes that connect them. Roads become lifelines, moral compasses, even stairways to heaven. Now shift from myth to movement. Long before the term globalization existed, roads were quietly stitching the world together. Take the humble chicken. DNA studies show these birds spread from Southeast Asia to Europe, not by winged migration, but on the feet of traders trudging along the Silk Road. the same routes carried more than goods, they transported entire worldviews. Buddhist monks walking from India to China didn't just carry scriptures, they brought new ways of thinking about time, medicine, and governance. A single caravan could carry Persian astronomy, Greek philosophy, and Indian mathematics, all mixing in the dust of a roadside caravanserai. The real magic happened at crossroads. In bustling hubs like Samarkand or Taxila, a Greek doctor might debate a Chinese alchemist while a Sogdian merchant translated, their words bouncing between languages like coins in a market. Recipes mutated along with dialects. Central Asian noodles met Italian pasta-making techniques, birthing dishes that now circle the globe. Even fashion transformed. Egyptian linen, Indian cotton, and Chinese silk blended into textiles that defied borders. This wasn't just trade, it was the world's first cultural internet with roads as its bandwidth. Yet this connectivity had a dark side. The same routes that spread ideas also carried plague, slavery, and invasive species. Black Death likely galloped along Mongol postal routes, while European diseases raced down Inca highways ahead of conquistadors. Roads didn't discriminate, they accelerated everything for better or worse. Today's debates about globalization aren't new. They're echoes of ancient fears about who or what might come walking down the next stretch of open road. Perhaps that's why myths endure. They remind us that every path holds dual potential, to unite or divide, to uplift or destroy. The yellow brick road promised Oz but demanded courage. The Bifrost shone brightly but would shatter at Ragnarok. Real roads, like their legendary counterparts, are never neutral. They're stages where humanity's grandest hopes and darkest fears play out, one traveler at a time. Centuries before fiber optic cables crisscrossed the ocean floor, a different kind of network pulsed with life, one carved from stone, stamped into dirt, and worn smooth by countless footsteps. The ancient world's roads didn't just connect cities, they wove continents into a single, throbbing web of exchange. Picture a bustling caravanserai on the Silk Road, where a Persian merchant haggles over Chinese porcelain while a Byzantine scribe jots down Indian astronomy notes. Nearby, a Sogdian musician plays a lute whose design echoes Greek lyres, its melody blending with the clink of coins from a dozen empires. This wasn't just trade, it was proto-globalization in action, a preview of our hyper-connected age written in dust and caravan tracks. The sheer scale of this early exchange would stagger modern minds. Roman ships sailing from Egypt to India returned laden not just with pepper and gems, but with entire botanical revolutions, evidence in the black pepper vines that soon twined through Italian gardens, or the mango pits carried westward to Persian orchards. Along the incense route, frankincense harvested in Oman's Dhofar region found its way to temples in Jerusalem and Rome, its smoke curling skyward in rituals separated by thousands of miles yet eerily similar. Even fashion went global. Elite Han Dynasty women draped themselves in sheer mermaid silk woven from Mediterranean sea silk, while patricians in Pompeii lounged on cushions stuffed with Central Asian goose down. But roads didn't just move goods, they turbocharged the spread of ideas. Buddhist monks trekking from Gandhara to China carried more than sutras. They brought Greco-Buddhist art styles that fused Apollo's curls with the Buddha's serene gaze. In Baghdad's House of Wisdom, scholars pored over Greek texts translated from Syriac versions originally smuggled along Persian trade routes. The decimal system raced from India to Arabia to Europe, transforming mathematics because a single merchant's ledger could cross 3 continents in a season. These were the original viral trends, spreading not through algorithms but along the relentless rhythm of footsteps and hoofbeats. Yet this connectivity had a dark undercurrent. The same highways that carried silk and spices also became superhighways for pandemics. When the plague of Justinian erupted in 541 AD, it didn't creep, it galloped. Grain ships fleeing Egypt's infected rat populations carried the disease to Constantinople's ports, where it exploded along the Via Egnatia into Europe. Within months, corpses piled up in Roman roadways from Antioch to Arles, their numbers telling a grim truth: globalization's blessings and curses have always traveled together. The Black Death's later rampage followed eerily similar paths, proving that roads don't discriminate between commerce and contagion. What's haunting is how these ancient networks mirror our modern world. The Silk Road's caravanserais functioned like medieval versions of Amazon warehouses stocked with goods from distant hubs, reliant on standardized currencies, and vulnerable to supply chain disruptions when wars or droughts struck. Inca quipu knotted cords tracking shipments along the Quihapac-Nyan weren't so different from today's barcodes, both systems reducing complex information to simple, scannable codes. Even the complaints sound familiar. A Roman tablet found near Hadrian's Wall grumbles about delayed olive oil shipments due to bandits on the Gaul routes, a 2,000-year-old Yelp review for ancient logistics. The lesson for our era is clear. These roads didn't just shape their own time, they wired habits of connection so deep, we're still following their blueprints. Modern trucking routes in Turkey still trace the ruts of Roman ox carts. Airline flight paths between Beijing and Tehran echo the Silk Road's camel trails. When a virus hops continents in hours instead of months, we're reliving the plague of Justinian with jet engines. The past whispers that connectivity isn't just about speed, it's about what we choose to amplify along the way. Perhaps the most poignant relics aren't the stones themselves, but the echoes they leave in our language. The word tariff comes from the Arabic tarifa, coined at Silk Road toll stations. Check, as in verification, derives from Persian chak, the stamp on caravan manifests. Even avocado traveled from Nahuatl ahuacatl to Spanish aguacate via colonial roads, its journey preserved in the syllables we chew. These linguistic fossils remind us that every time we speak, we walk the same paths as traders, pilgrims, and explorers who first wove the world together, 1 mile at a time. Abandoned roads are silent witnesses to the rise and fall of civilizations, their weathered stones holding stories more enduring than the empires that built them. These forgotten pathways aren't just relics, they're living classrooms. Take the Inca's Quihapac-Nyan, a highway system so advanced its suspension bridges inspired modern engineering. Or Rome's Via Appia, where grooves worn by chariots reveal traffic patterns older than the Colosseum itself. Every rut, every moss-covered milestone is a puzzle piece in humanity's grand mosaic, showing how cultures conquered distance long before GPS. What makes these roads remarkable isn't just their engineering, it's their adaptability. The same cobblestones that carried Roman legions later guided medieval pilgrims, then Napoleon's cannons, and finally the bicycles of modern tourists. Like palimpsests, each generation inscribed new meaning onto these routes without erasing the past. In Turkey, sections of the Persian Royal Road now serve as village footpaths, their original purpose remembered only in weathered inscriptions. In Cambodia, farmers still plant rice along Angkor's causeways, their lives intertwined with infrastructure built 8 centuries ago. These roads refuse to become mere museum exhibits. They remain woven into the fabric of daily life. Yet their greatest lesson might be one of humility. The Maya Sakbiob, once gleaming white under the Yucatan sun, now lie buried beneath jungle canopies, a reminder that even the grandest projects succumb to time. The difference between a thriving trade route and an overgrown trail, often comes down to something as fragile as a water source drying up or a political alliance crumbling. These abandoned paths whisper a warning. Infrastructure is only as strong as the society that maintains it. So what will future archaeologists make of our highways? Imagine them puzzling over the symbolism of interstate cloverleafs, or debating why 20th century engineers favored asphalt over stone. Will they see our roads as we see Rome's testaments to ingenuity, or as cautionary tales about short-sighted planning? The answer depends on what we choose to preserve today. Every time a Roman road is repurposed as a bike trail or an Inca stairway is stabilized for hikers, we're not just saving stones, we're safeguarding the collective memory of human ambition. These hidden maps challenge us to look beyond the surface. That overgrown trail near your town might be a colonial post road. The oddly straight county line could follow a Native American trading path. History isn't confined to textbooks, it's embedded in the land itself, waiting for curious minds to decode it. By protecting these corridors, we honor the countless footsteps that shaped our world, from barefoot messengers to ox cart drivers to modern commuters. The journey doesn't end here. Every abandoned road is an invitation to explore, to question, and to connect across time. So the next time you walk a forest trail or drive a rural highway, remember, you're treading paths where history still echoes. What stories will you help preserve for those who follow? Thanks for joining this expedition through time. If you've enjoyed unraveling these secrets of the past, subscribe and join us as we keep uncovering the layers of history hidden in plain sight. Drop a comment below about the most intriguing abandoned road you've encountered. We'd love to hear your discoveries. Until our next adventure, keep your eyes on the path beneath your feet. You never know what forgotten worlds might be waiting just off the beaten track.